What up, peeps? So I'm gonna take a break from editing my second part to What Lies Under the Silver Lake and discussing a recent movie that I just watched. So I watched Turning Red, and I was tempted into turning it off. Okay, that was just a force and a joke. But to be honest, I had no real expectations for this film. I think it's safe to say that Pixar at this point has lost their spark in storytelling after Up. So every Pixar movie that came after has either been watchable or watchable yet disappointing or just flat out bad. Turning Red fits the tier of nearly close to Cars, but still better than something like Brave, which I remember absolutely nothing about after seeing it. Now let me get to what I actually did like about this movie. Now what I did like was the clever editing choices, the exploration of Asian culture. There's an amazingly shot and animated food segment that I wish went on just a little longer, and as I expected, the animation overall was phenomenal. It's very clear that Pixar still cannot be topped when it comes to their animation because they're constantly finding new ways to evolve and improve their craft. Now this film was directed by Domi Shi, who directed her first short film called Bayo, which I found to be very endearing and touching, making good use of its very bizarre concept, but the animation was something I haven't actually seen before from Pixar, and being by an Asian animator, it helps to add variety in the character models pertaining to different ethnic groups. It's the highlight of Soul, where they actually made black people look like black people. She was the storyboard artist for Toy Story 4, The Incredibles, The Good Dinosaur, and Inside Out, and it's safe to say that she has a stellar eye for visuals and animation variety, and understands how to present such creative detail in the energetic and vibrant animation. Turning Red might be my favorite Pixar film strictly in the field of animation since WALL-E. There's great use of action lines that you see from like an anime, great uses of exaggerated or over-the-top facial expressions, and small attention to detail like sweat or tears that really make the characters themselves manifest from the visuals and animation, followed by carefully intelligent uses of lighting and textures, and the way they move really gives them energy and flow that can make for great visual comedy if the comedy was actually funny. And lastly, I just love the way the characters are all designed. Something that I get from Pixar that I just don't get from other animated films from other studios is that Pixar always designs their characters in a way that makes them all distinctive from one another, from clothes to attire to movement, and one of the strongest aspects of any Pixar movie is that it makes them feel very real. The main characters' three friends have their own unique look, design, and personality, and is both cartoony yet still nuanced. It reflects people in real life in a sense. Unlike something like Illumination, where the character models are overly simplistic and lazy, and sometimes makes models visually and aesthetically interchangeable, Pixar pays attention to nuance and details of characters they distinctively design. The movie in short is an absolute feast for the eyes, and I'd watch this movie again, mute it, and just admire this film's animation and overall art style. Alright, now let me get to the stuff that I didn't like, and this mostly revolves around the script. Now this is a spoiler review, so skip to this point of the video because I'm going to condense all of my issues with this movie in a short amount of time, so there's your warning, peeps. Now Pixar has been having this frustrating habit of writing scripts that are cheaply plotting their stories to get to the film's themes and ideas, and this film is about a girl named Maylin that's going through the puberty stage of her life, and I thought that this was an interesting topic for a Pixar movie to work around, and it's clearly a reflection of the director's own experiences as a teenager, but did the screenplay have to be so freaking contrived and artificial? The main character was pretty unlikable honestly for most of the film, but I'm surprised she never really developed throughout the film. She and her mom's dynamic was nothing special, just incredibly predictable and underwhelming, especially towards the end of the movie. The opening scene, despite me liking her character at first, introduces Maylene in a heavy expository way. All her motivations and goals didn't really get me that invested. All she wanted to do was just go to a freaking concert, and it made sense that she's a teenager and that she develops an attraction to boys, but the entire film's plot is built around this goal, and it just feels so superficial and hollow to me. The events in the script that just checklist the aspects of the plot felt very forced and unnatural, and the film at times never really felt like it could have gone just a little farther, but held back by disjointed priorities of who this movie is being marketed to, and I'll talk in detail about that much later. But once we get to the whole Red Panda transformation, the film almost falls apart completely. For one, is it just me, or is everyone sick and tired of the different ethnic main characters transforming into something non-human for the sake of metaphorical purposes to communicate the themes in the story? Is this really the go-to for trying to explore different themes from different ethnic or cultural perspectives? Is it just easier that way to write a movie around? I mean, really? I don't know, it's just been annoying me to the roof lately. But basically, she turns into this red panda when she leans too much on her emotions. This was a generational instillment that is now passed on onto her, and the only way to break the curse is to do a ritual during the red moon, which is conveniently the same day as the concert for the 4th Street Boys or whatever they're called that she wants to see. So as far as the transformation goes, it's pretty inconsistent. So if she gets emotionally extreme, she turns into a red panda, but there are times where she's crying softly in a relaxed state, but she turns into a panda. But she can also control it, but looking at things in her room triggers the transformation in ways that are against her will, but they have to remove everything in her room, but she still turns into a panda. But when she tries to convince her family to take her to the concert, she doesn't have any issues controlling her emotions with the 4th Street poster in the background. That doesn't make a single amount of sense to me. Is she hypersensitive, high-strung, or does she have emotional instability issues? Does the director think that all teenage girls are like this? Does the director think that all teenage girls are this hypersensitive to boys? But once again, I get the themes that she's exploring, but for God's sake, I think it's overkill to portray a teenager going through hormonal issues and losing their shit every single time. She was like this before the transformation, so when did the activation of the curse generally start? I assume she was 13 at the start of this movie, so does the curse start as a teenager or not, or does it start earlier? So the cheap excuse for the origin of the Red Panda transformation is that Maylene's ancestor was so obsessed with pandas that she asked the gods to turn her into a freaking panda. She helps to defend her family, but why not ask the gods to transform her into a powerful warrior, or ask the gods to give her absolute agency over the transformation? It feels so incredibly contrived, and she actually instilled this red panda blessing, quote unquote, to be passed for generations. So basically, Maylene and her family through generations had to suffer as a teenager to have no control over being a big red panda because their ancestor liked pandas. I wish I was making that up. Also, if this curse has been extensive through generations of Maylene and her family, why didn't Maylene's own family prevent the curse? If the red moon occurs every 2 or 3 years, then these people had plenty of time.
Why didn't you warn me? I thought I had more time.
You had plenty of time, lady. So yeah, we don't get detailed information for why Maylene's mom decided not to prevent this before she was even born, but it makes less sense that Maylene's grandmother and aunts have this curse contained rather than having the curse completely broken ahead of time. Huh? Why didn't Maylene get a pendant to secure the red panda herself? If you weren't going to break the curse, then why didn't you give your daughter her own freaking pendant when she was still a baby? Or maybe do the ritual style while she's still an infant, before she was a teenager. Why didn't you just tell her about this beforehand? Because they can break these pendant things at will and they turn into pandas. And why break them instead of them being made for them to control the panda's curse? It's less logic behind the cultural mysticism, but more so the logic behind the behavior of the characters. Because they end up having to break the curse anyway, but they break the curse only now solely because the plot convenience of them including Maylene's mom in the breaking of the curse in the 3rd act wouldn't happen. Now, I looked up the symbolism for a red panda in Chinese culture, and I see the connection of a female turning into a red panda, which I find to be pretty interesting, but I felt Maylene's character didn't reflect the symbolism of the red panda. Had she had been more flawed yet still likable and understandable, I can see this idea being worked in a script better, and I would be more emotionally attached to our protagonist, but instead we have a script that feels both forced and unnatural, with characters behaving in such senseless ways that it serves the plot. And not the first time this has happened in a Pixar movie. By the end of the movie, Maylene chooses to continue her curse for future generations unless she actually plans on having kids or not. I mean, she's already developing an attraction to boys, so considering that she chooses to keep this curse, I assume she's going to get a pendant for contingency purposes for when she decides to fall in love and get married, but then the cycle continues. This is actually a much darker, open-ended conclusion than the movie implies, but the whole theme is accept yourself for who you are, even if you're a red panda beast that could possibly have beastly impulses that dictate your human emotions, and you could possibly hurt somebody the same way that your mom did to hers. What a weird way to end this movie. And then there are irritating plot contrivances, such as why Maylene hid all Red Panda merch under her bed instead of their friends hiding it in their own rooms, in their own houses. Why the smoke when the students were coughing was slowly dissolving, but the students didn't bother looking behind them to see what exactly caused that random pink combustion. They all had their eyes closed and were coughing simultaneously so that the script doesn't want Maylene's existence as a panda to be known in this portion of the film yet. It's small things like that that I consider examples of what holds this movie back. But Pixar movies are for kids and are devoid from criticism, so it doesn't really matter much what I say. The characters are mainly just great to look at and unfortunately don't really have much depth. The father is just a plot contrivance to find the camera that was conveniently on for him to confront his daughter with and give her a real life lesson of self-acceptance. Her friend characters, like I said, are well designed, and I did like them overall, but they lack depth as well and were just being dragged through the plot. The mom character might have been my favorite character in the film despite being incredibly stupid, but she was pretty enjoyable overall. And also, let me address the controversy of this film's central topic that involves a mother giving her daughter pads because it's that time, aka her menstrual period. Now, I personally don't see a problem with it. I don't blame parents for not expecting the film to put things like this in, but if you have a problem with the movie exploring mature topics, then yeah, parents beware. And at that point, stay away from films like Up, WALL-E, The Incredibles, Finding Nemo, which, might I add, had a scene of a barracuda eating dozens of unfertilized fish eggs with living babies inside of them. This stuff was admittedly done in a harmless way, so parents, please stop crying. And the fact that most of you mothers nowadays have listened to Usher, Backstreet Boys, and NSYNC back in the day, discussing this stuff with your daughter before they're teenagers is allowed, as well as any sort of topics about developmental stages into teenagers. It's not that serious, people. It's not. And of course, this American had an issue with the ritual scene, as if this film isn't written with the element of Asian mysticism and culture in mind, and the fact that this is also a clear fantasy film. Then please stay away from Disney films as a whole. I can't stand this type of one-dimensional criticism from crying parents that whine about things like this. It just annoys me. As far as rebellious teenagers go, I could see what they were going for. Like I said, I didn't like the main character, but a rewrite communicating her rebellious nature that she's developing into, minus her brattiness, would probably help me understand her more. But the small stuff that parents are complaining about is just incredibly petty and pretty ridiculous in my opinion. Kind of reflects on what the movie was trying to explore when it comes to mothers and daughters. Overall, this movie just felt way too formulaic and uninspired. Like Brave, I'm gonna forget 95% of this movie. People seem to like it, and that's great, but once again, this recent Pixar film lacks heart and organic storytelling for the sake of emotional manipulation and artificial plot progression. Maybe we'll go back one day, but I'm pretty pessimistic towards the studio's future storytelling philosophy. Beautiful to look at, but not really worth it for anybody that actually cares about wanting a good story. So I'm gonna give this film a 2 out of 5 stars. Alright peeps, peace out and love y'all.